Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. What's interesting about so many of the people you see talking on television is not just that they tell you things that they know are not true. They lie regularly, and they shade the truth even more than that. You, of course, knew that. It's obvious. What's amazing is how they do it in unison. One will say something false, and then in what seems like minutes, all the others are saying it too, the exact same thing. Sometimes word for word. It's like they're all texting each other in commercial breaks. Or maybe they just know instinctively what the latest Democratic Party talking points will be. We could give you endless examples of this, but here's the most recent one. In the days since last week's midterm elections, all the geniuses on cable have simultaneously decided that the migrant caravan marching toward the United States is a mirage. It's not real. It never has been real. It was always a fake threat created by unscrupulous right-wing politicians to win the last election. Watch them sing that tune in perfect harmony.
This was never an urgent issue. These people were 1,000+ miles away from the border.
To also further your point, if you are so concerned about invaders and very bad people, wouldn't you be on the border today instead of your Secretary of Defense?
They've been running on an imaginary caravan.
The president talked a lot. He couldn't stop talking about the so-called caravan heading toward the border.
This stupid caravan. You know, it's a lie that this caravan is a problem of that magnitude.
Right. The so-called caravan, the imaginary caravan. That's what Jeff Zucker told them to say. Too bad we now have pictures. Reality is the enemy of propaganda. And the reality on our southern border tonight is that a large number of migrants from that caravan are now massed just south of San Diego, and they're trying to get into this country. In the meantime, those same people are overwhelming city services in Tijuana and causing a crisis there. The people from the caravan are doing all of this because they actually exist. They are a physical reality, no matter what they're telling you on CNN. Well, apparently nobody has alerted California Senator Kamala Harris. She believes that anyone worried about illegal immigration must be a dangerous racist. And that's why she just compared federal law enforcement officers to the Ku Klux Klan.
Klan was what we would call today a domestic terrorist group.
Why? Why would we call them domestic terrorist group?
Because they tried to use fear and force to change political environment.
And what was the motivation for the use of fear and force?
It was based on race and ethnicity.
Right. Are you aware of the perception of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between
I'm talking about perception.
Officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
That puts ICE in the same category as the KKK.
American citizens trying to protect their country's borders, upholding laws passed by our democratically elected Congress, are somehow like the KKK. It seems like an especially stupid and vicious thing to say. It's cruel, really. How would you feel if you were an ICE officer or your brother was? Can you imagine throwing out that kind of slander at your fellow Americans just for doing their jobs? You'd have to be an awfully self-righteous person to talk like that. Harris is. So are a lot of them. Listen to Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, a man who advocates for unrestricted late-term abortion, explain that he's on Jesus' team, and you aren't.
Jesus said, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me. What you did for those who seemed less important, you did for me. Not the least of these. It's just society may act like they're less important, but we don't, because we understand the value of people. We understand the dignity of work. We understand the values this country stands for.
We understand the value of little people, Senator Brown says. Really, do you? How about the millions of American workers whose wages haven't risen in decades, thanks in part to mass immigration? Or how, by the way, since we're on the topic, how about the people of Tijuana? The caravan came north because they knew they'd have a shot of getting into this country. Democrats told them that. They encouraged this whole thing from the very first day. Now it's a disaster. The mayor of Tijuana says his city is buckling under the weight of the migrants. Many of them are criminals, the mayor of Tijuana says. Violence has broken out. People have been hurt. Dozens of migrants never even made it to the border, by the way. They are still missing, presumably kidnapped by drug cartels. The human cost has been very high. Democrats are not talking about that cost somehow. It's not interesting to them. It won't win them elections. We'd like to talk about it, though. That's why we invited Chris Hahn on. He's an attorney, radio host, and former aide to Senator Chuck Schumer. He joins us tonight. So, Chris, before we even get to all that, Sherrod Brown from Ohio, who's been endorsed by NARAL, by the way, is lecturing us on Jesus. Do you think Sherrod Brown's a little bit closer to Jesus than, say, I am?
Well, Matthew 25 applies here, don't you think? I mean, that's what he was quoting. We have people who are fleeing for their lives, who are in desperate need, who want to come to this country and seek asylum legally, by the way, by presenting themselves at the border. And we are sending troops. And by the way, we're sending troops to Texas when they're coming in San Diego.
Before you roll right into your talking point, hold on. Before you get to the script, let me just, if you could just address my question, though. I mean, is that the new standard? You think it's a fair standard? This is not something that I have introduced into this. This is Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio is lecturing us about how he's on Jesus's team and we're not. Is that a fair form of political discourse? Is this a theocracy to assess what Jesus would do first?
No, I think we're pointing out the hypocrisy on the right that likes to claim that they are Christians, yet they ignore the teachings of Christ, which Matthew 25 clearly directs us to help those in need.
They're hypocrites. So people who don't believe in God get to tell Christians what it is to be a Christian. So let me just ask you, which politicians would you say right now on the right are invoking Jesus when they talk about building a wall? Like, what exactly are you talking about?
How about Mike Pence? How about Mike Pence every single day, everything he does? Every time Mike Pence talks, he invokes Christ. Every single time. I'm not going to name one every time.
Just one example.
Of any speech he's ever given.
Tell me
how about the convention? The first thing he said at the convention was, I'm a Christian, a father, and a conservative in that order.
So he's a Christian.
That's what Mike Pence says. So if he's really a Christian, he should be practicing what Jesus taught in Matthew 25.
And you think that Jesus would have open borders? Is that what you're saying? I mean, is it? I guess my point is it a little much? I'm aware of the verse. Hold on, I'm aware of the verse.
Yeah.
So, but you're comfortable with this, is what you're saying.
I don't know. Let me tell you. I mean, you're aware of it, but I don't know that you believe it. That's what it says, Tucker.
Do you see yourself?
That's what Mike Pence pretends to acknowledge, but he doesn't.
I'm trying not to end this interview right now because I'm getting offended. I wonder if you understand the extent to which you're playing with fire, introducing religious faith, appropriating someone else's religious faith, by the way, into a conversation about public policy. Do you think that's a wise thing to do? Do you think if Mike Pence got up and said, I'm for building a wall and I'm quoting this scripture to justify it, I know for a fact that I would say, whoa, settle down. There's a public policy question. It's a multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. Don't start doing that. It's not a theocracy. But you're saying that now that that's okay.
Here's the thing. One, I didn't mean to offend you on religious grounds. I take that back.
Come on now. I'm on Jesus' team and you're not? Like, what is that?
I hear you. I hear you. I'm just pointing out that many on the right have taken Christ up as their banner of how they want to govern, and yet when it comes to doing something like this, they ignore the teachings of Christ. I do not think that religion or scripture should be the basis of our governance in this country.
But it's okay
I believe that the
when
founders put
Sherrod Brown,
separation of church
Mr.
and
Late-Term
state
Abortion,
for a
does
reason.
it, lecturing me on Jesus. Okay.
Well, look.
Let me ask you this. Do you think it's all, since I guess everything's allowed now, it doesn't matter, like whatever it takes to get what we want, is it okay to compare federal law enforcement officials to the KKK, as Senator Harris did yesterday?
Well, look, I watched that whole clip, Tucker, and frankly, she was not comparing them to the KKK. She was suggesting to the nominee that there is a perception among some, and she even said, probably wrongfully, that there are people out there who are doing things to create fear just as the KKK did.
I think of.
So how are we going to correct the perception?
Okay. So I get it.
How are we going to correct the perception?
I get it, Chris. Look, I mean, a lot of Hitler's closest staff wore blue ties. I'm not calling you a Nazi. I'm just saying a lot of people think you are. And now that I've raised it and linked you to the Nazis, what's your response? I mean, no, she's comparing federal law enforcement officials to the Klan. And I just wonder, like, is there a limit to what you can say in public if you're a U.S. senator before you drive the country into some kind of internal conflict? Like, can you really say things like that now?
You should not compare law enforcement people to the Klan, and that is not what she was doing. She was engaging in a conversation with somebody who was seeking to run ICE on how he would change the perception among some people in this country that they should fear ICE. in the same
Do you
way
have
that they
a,
feared
is there,
other
a,
groups,
is there
even if
a
that
poll
perception
on
was
this?
wrong.
Hold on, but how would Kamala Harris, who's lived in rich person worlds her entire life, how exactly would she, how would she know this? Does she have some polls she's pointing to? People think that ICE is like the Klan? I don't think she does. No, she's trying to impugn the personal integrity of people serving the country on the board. Like, what is this? The Klan?
She's heard from constituents. She's heard from groups that represent people who are fearful of ICE in her state. I'm sure she's trying to correct that fear because Senator Harris is a very sensible person, and I watched that entire clip
accuses
as I
law enforcement of
to
being
do.
like the Klan. Really?
She wasn't accusing them of anything.
Of course she is. I think she's totally irresponsible. I want her to be responsible. She could be president. Finally, is it time to concede that the caravan is real and that they're overwhelming Tijuana? The mayor of Tijuana says that a lot of members of the caravan are violent criminals, and he's afraid of them. Is he a racist, do you think? It sounds like he might be.
Nobody said it wasn't real. They said it wasn't a real threat. And even
but the mayor of Tijuana
Mattis,
sounds
General
like a flat-out
Kelly,
racist, maybe a Klansman. Do you think he is?
The president's own generals acknowledge that this is not a real threat to our national security.
But the mayor of Tijuana says it's a threat to him. Wait, hold on. Wait, I mean, I'm wondering, would Jesus be okay with what the mayor of Tijuana has said? Is he a racist? He says they're violent criminals.
Is Tijuana analogous to the United States of America?
Just
and what we should be afraid
the
of as
mayor of
Americans?
Tijuana sounds like a hardened bigot.
Tijuana has a lot less resources than the United States of America. We have more people along our border, I would imagine, than there are police officers in Tijuana.
I'm worried. I think Jesus would be very upset about the mayor of Tijuana. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going to call Sherrod Brown about it after this. Father Brown, maybe I'll see him on Sunday preaching from the pulpit. Ugh. Chris, great to see you. Thank you. For the time being, America continues to welcome millions of low-skilled workers. What does that mean for American workers in the age of automation? Jobs are going away. What is everyone going to do in 20 years? We'll address that after the break. Well, the percentage of foreign-born in the United States is the highest it's been in a century, maybe ever. It's hard exactly to know, but it's still rising in any case. 67 million Americans, more than 1 in 5, speak a language other than English at home. Pretty much everyone in Washington is fine with that, number rising. Some of them want the U.S. to completely open its borders to the rest of the world. But what would the effect be if we did that? Who is coming here? What are they like? And where's all of this going? If you look at these numbers, we are joined by Stephen Camarata, Director of Research at the Center for Immigration Studies. He joins us tonight. Stephen, just the first obvious observation. People, when I was a kid, used to care about overpopulation. I guess nobody does anymore?
Yeah, that's a fair question. The latest Census Bureau numbers indicate that immigration by 2060 will add 75 million people to the U.S. population. So you'd think people concerned about the environment or traffic pollution, congestion, sprawl would think about that.
Well, but those are real concerns, which I will admit as a kid, I mocked the liberals for having, but as I get older, I realize you don't want to live in a crowded place. Everyone's unhappy. It's horrible and it's dirty. So does anyone on the left still say that?
There are a few progressives out there. You may know the organization Numbers USA. They have a lot of progressive support, and they tend to focus a lot on the population growth. But most mainstream people on the left don't touch it with a 10-foot pole because it's all, in the United States, about 95% of population growth long-term is new immigrants and the children they have, and so they don't want to touch the issue anymore.
Wait, what percentage of population growth?
About 95%. Between now and 2060, about 95% of the increase in the U.S. population will come from future immigrants and the children and grandchildren they'll have.
So that's almost a complete turnover in population, basically.
No, that's population growth. That's about 75 million people.
Okay.
So most of all the increase is coming from immigration. So from about 328 to 404 is about where we're headed, something like that.
So the language numbers are really interesting to me. 1 in 5 people living in this country does not speak English at home. Has it ever been that high?
It's hard to say, but it may have been that high in the past. What's even more interesting, or perhaps more troubling, is how concentrated it is. So there are all kinds of areas where the Census Bureau divides the country into various areas where 95% of the people, or 85% of the people, and 95 and 85% of the people in schools, kids in schools, speak a foreign language at home. That's what's truly extraordinary. One wonders how assimilation can work with that level of immigration and foreign language concentration.
So what are, broadly speaking, the education levels of the immigrants who are coming here?
It varies enormously.
Of course it does.
So, you're looking at a situation where 80% plus of immigrants from India come with a college degree or more, and then for, say, immigrants from Central America, it's less than 10% come with a college degree. And the same thing for immigrants.
So how does that break down? So what percentage of our immigrants are coming with no education versus those coming with high degrees of education?
Yeah, right now, somewhat over a fourth of all immigrants have less than a high school education when they come. A little over a fourth also have no more than a high school education. So a high school education or less is a little over half, and then a little less than half is some college or even college and more. So that's the very rough breakdown.
So the majority have high school education or less?
Or less, right. So no education beyond high school. And we know from a lot of research that their welfare use and poverty is quite high.
Of course, across the board. Stephen Camarata, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you just heard, as millions of people, many of them low-skilled, half, continue to enter this country, an obvious question arises. What does that mean for our economy, for America's working class, which is already having its jobs phased out by automation, but for a lot of other parts of our society? Oren Cass is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, author of the book The Once and Future Worker, A Vision for the Renewal of Work in America. A thoughtful look at that question. He joins us tonight. Oren, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me, Tucker.
So there's a debate over what automation is going to do long term. Everyone seems agreed that it's going to eliminate a lot of jobs that we currently think of as real jobs. They'll be gone. But is there any scenario in the future as we perceive it now where you'd want more than half of all immigrants to have a high school diploma or less?
I think that's a concern we have to grapple with. If we already feel like we have an imbalance, too many unskilled workers relative to what the economy wants, adding more unskilled workers to that mix pushes us in the wrong direction.
How concerned are you about that?
I think it's a concern. I think it's one among many. I think there are a lot of things we're doing that really hurt less skilled workers. The way we approach immigration, the way we approach education. I mean, we don't care about education for less skilled workers. We say college for all, and if you don't complete college, you fell out somewhere along the way. And all of our money goes to the folks who are actually completing college, even though they're the ones who need the least help.
So why wouldn't you, if you were thinking thoughtfully about who to let, if you started with the presumption that some immigration is good, that's where I start anyway, why wouldn't you be thoughtful about letting in more people who already have the education that you think your economy requires?
I think that's exactly what we should do. And I think, most economists would look at the issue and say, if you want to benefit workers at the bottom, if you want to benefit their wages, pretty much the models say high-skilled immigration is good for low-skilled workers. More low-skilled immigration, it can't be good for low-skilled workers. You're just adding more competition to the market.
I've had this debate 100 times on this show over the past couple of years, and I often hear people say, all the studies show that's not true. Bringing in millions more poor people makes us all richer. Is there such a study that shows that?
I'm not aware of a study that shows that. There are a lot of studies that show that the mix of immigrants we've had over time, which has been low-skilled and high-skilled, it's reflected roughly what's in the population.
Right.
And so that's okay. But that's the wrong question to ask. The question to ask is which would be better? Given that we're going to have high-skilled immigration, is it good to also have a lot of low-skilled immigration, or is it good to have less low-skilled immigration? And what you would say is the less low-skilled immigration you have, the better things are going to be for the low-skilled workers who are here.
So I sort of allotted over the meat of your book, which is what would you, if you could do one thing to help people who are struggling to reap the benefits of our economy, what would it be?
Well, I think conceptually we have to actually value work, and we have to say it's not just about consumption and how much we all get to consume and how cheap stuff is. We actually have to realize that people having work is what's most important to them. And then
wait a second. Paying everybody off with $3,000 a month won't be the answer?
No, it's a disaster. It's a great answer for the folks who are doing really well. The funny thing is, the higher up the income ladder you go, the more people say, oh, not everyone needs a job. People, we can send them money. You go down to the bottom end of the ladder, that's where you find the people who say, no, we don't just want money, we want the jobs, because they understand how critical work is, not just to their own satisfaction, their own lives, to their families, to their communities. And if we don't focus on that, if we just say, oh, we'll grow the pie, what they say, and
right.
we'll just send everyone a piece, right? You don't have to bake your own pie, we'll just give you a slice. That's not what people want, and that's not a model for a good society.
That used to be really obvious.
It did until about the middle of the last century, and then we flipped and we said, as long as consumption keeps going up, as long as everyone can have more stuff every year, we're going to call that success. But that's not success.
Brightly colored crap made in China will make us happy. Did it?
I don't see a lot of that, no.
I don't either. Warren Cass, really thoughtful. Thank you for that.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Georgia's disputed election has finally ended, but in Florida, Democrats are still fighting to overturn the result. We'll have the very latest from both those races after the break. Abrams has finally conceded in the governor's race in Georgia. Abrams had trailed the Republican there, Brian Kemp, by a big margin since election night. But she and her team of lawyers fought on. Just this morning, they were considering a legal challenge that would have sought to order another round of voting on the grounds of alleged voter suppression and fraud. But this afternoon, bowing to reality, apparently, Abrams announced she'd be dropping her legal challenges, and that effectively ended the race. And yet Abrams refused to actually concede. In fact, in her remarks, which are so Orwellian you should go on the internet and watch them, the woman who got fewer votes than her opponent said that, we're quoting now, democracy failed in Georgia. Okay. Well, the Senate race in Florida is still dragging on, though. Hand recounts of some ballots are continuing across the state, but the Democrat in the Senate race, Bill Nelson, doesn't look like he will win. His path to victory is getting very narrow at this point. Craig Patrick is political editor and chief investigator for Fox 13 in Tampa Bay. He's been on every night this week. We're going to miss the recount because we're going to miss having him on, but he joins us tonight. Craig, what is going on?
Well, the hand recount is going to continue until Sunday, but we can tell you that Bill Nelson is surely doomed. And he is doomed in large part because he had placed his hopes and his trust in Broward County, which, as we've seen a time or two, that's kind of like placing your trust and hope in Harry Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber. But the irony here is that Bill Nelson thought that Broward County would be dumber and less effective than it actually was, because there were some 30,000 votes that had flown through the machines, not once, but twice, that did not register a vote, mostly Democrats, in Broward County. So Nelson was saying, these machines, Broward, here you go again. But what we found out today is when election workers looked at those ballots by hand, they discovered that the scanners didn't register votes because most of the voters, around 98%, left that race blank. Maybe these Democrats didn't vote for Rick Scott because he's a Republican. Maybe they didn't vote for Bill Nelson because he's Bill Nelson. Who knows? But that's the fact of the matter here. And with this, it puts Bill Nelson in an impossible position. There is chatter and speculation. Some Democrats said they couldn't see the race on the ballot because it had been tucked in the lower left, and perhaps a poor ballot design by Broward County. But even so, that's just tough luck for Nelson. There's history for that, too. Remember, Tucker, I know you do, in Palm Beach County when it designed the butterfly ballot in 2000 that Democrats wound up tricking Democrats into voting for Pat Buchanan. And Democrats will never forgive themselves for that. I don't think they will ever forgive themselves for this. But either way, it doesn't matter because once all is said and done, it'll be certified on Tuesday. Rick Scott is going to Washington, and Bill Nelson is going to get the home version of the game.
Democrats voted for Pat Buchanan. Thank you for reminding me that. That was really a high point in the history of the state of Florida. I just love that. Craig, thank you for that and for all of your updates this week. They've been great.
Thank you.
President Trump says he's ready to answer the Mueller investigation's questions, but is Mueller ready to produce any evidence of collusion with Russia? That's next. Well, the president says he's finished writing his answers to questions he received from the Mueller team over at the independent counsel investigation. His lawyers say the answers will be turned over very soon. Meanwhile, more than 36 sealed indictments have been lodged in federal court here in Washington. Some speculate at least some of these could be from Mueller. Dan Bongino was a former Secret Service agent, NRA TV contributor, author of the book Spygate, The Attempted Sabotage of Donald J. Trump, and he joins us tonight. Dan, thanks a lot for coming on. So, if at some point we're going to find out who's going to be indicted, clearly people are going to be indicted, and if those indictments are for crimes against the interests of this country, collusion with Russia, treason, I'll applaud those indictments and root for convictions. But if they're for something much less than that, like lying in the course of the investigation, that has nothing to do at all with the core crime, I and a lot of other people are going to think that this is really a reckless act. What will it do to the country if Mueller does that, do you think?
Yeah, and think about it, Tucker. This has gone on for about 18 months. Think about all the lives have been ruined. The country's been, its politics have been upended. There's very serious talk from the left about impeachment over a crime, Tucker, that no one can produce a scintilla of evidence to this day was even committed. And let me just applaud you. I agree with you on that. If there ever is evidence that actually surfaces of treasonous acts against the United States government, Republican, Democrat, or indifferent, then you deserve to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Tucker, the problem is we live in a constitutional republic. None of that evidence has actually been produced. As a matter of fact, one, collusion isn't even a crime. And I don't say that as some kind of a word dance. I say that because there is evidence of Russian collusion against the Hillary team that produced evidence from Russian sources and people that showed up in the Trump Tower meeting with Don Jr. that the left makes such a stink about were connected to people connected to the Hillary team. But the left isn't interested in any of that. That's why I bring that up.
It just seems like we've lost sight of the purported goal, which was protecting the country from a foreign power. And no one's even really pretending that this is about anything other than settling your political grudges with the force of a prosecution. That doesn't seem like an American way to go about settling political differences. It seems like a totalitarian way to do it.
No, it absolutely is. And think about it. Let's use the FBI, the senior management's own words. Their case was bedrocked around this dossier, which was a political document. It's a dossier that the FBI director, Tucker, called salacious and unverified. The number two, Andy McCabe, said they wouldn't have a case without the dossier. Their words, these aren't mine. The Bill Priestep, who was the head of the division investigating this case, when asked about verifying the dossier, Tucker, you know what he said? Oh, it's in its infancy, the verification process. The lead investigator in the case, Peter Strzok, when asked about the case, he said, hey, there could be no there. And here's one more for you. Lisa Page, the lawyer in the case, the FBI lawyer, said to congressional investigators, this is just months ago, not 2 years ago when it started, she said, hey, it still could be literally nothing. Literally nothing? We've upended the whole country looking for this infamous Russian collusion, and it could be literally nothing? I mean, this is scary stuff. So you're not just throwing around the tyrannical word lightly. There's actual backbone there.
The last administration spied on its political enemies using our intel agencies in violation of the law and custom and decency, the rules of politics. I mean, it's disgusting. And I know everyone thinks it's fine because everyone hates Trump. But that's a really terrible precedent to put in place, I think.
Anyway. Tucker, that's not even in dispute. And if you look up a CNN of all places article, April 14th of 2017, we not only spied on it using these people on our intelligence community, we used foreign intelligence operators. CNN wrote a piece about it. April 14th, 2017, about British intel spying on people for the Obama administration on the Trump team.
If the George W. Bush administration had done that to Obama, as God watches, I would have not have defended that. Dan, thank you very much.
Me too. Yes, sir.
Great to see you. Well, the wildfires in California really are horrible. They're the deadliest in the state's history. Is the government losing its ability to handle natural disasters? That's one lesson, perhaps, of all this. Dave Rubin joins us after the break to discuss that. Well, it's the tale of leaders failing the people they're supposed to serve. The Camp Fire in Northern California is now the deadliest wildfire in California's history. More than 60 people have been confirmed dead. More than 600, amazingly, are still missing. Firefighters say it will take weeks to contain the blaze. Meanwhile, across the country in New York, a surprise snowstorm yesterday completely paralyzed the country's largest city. Thousands lost power. The mass transit system broke down. People spent the night in their cars. Mayor Bill de Blasio was left at a total loss.
I'm frustrated, too. I'm frustrated as a New Yorker who was stuck in traffic like so many other people were. In truth, this was a kind of perfect storm. It emerged bigger and later than anyone expected. Obviously affected the whole tri-state area in a very severe way.
Yeah, okay, but it was still a snowstorm. Those happen every single year. And so it raises the question, are American leaders still able to handle the basics of governing? Dave Rubin hosts the Rubin Report on YouTube. He joins us now. Dave, thanks a lot for coming on. So I watch the fire in California, which, no single person's responsible for. The snowstorm yesterday in New York, same thing. And then the voting debacles in Broward County, and I'm thinking, keeping the roads clear, the fires quenched, the votes counted, these are the core functions of government, and they can't do them. So what should I infer from that?
Well, we seem to have a lot of things that seem to be crumbling at the same time. I thought I would just quickly tell you something that's sort of personal here. You know, you were on my show a couple weeks ago, and I had a good friend who's a public person, a verified Twitter personality, and a public person, apologized to me yesterday. He said that he couldn't share my interview with you because you're so controversial, it would upset his friends and family and things like that. I relate this to all of this because it seems that just our ability to talk about anything, whether it's how to deal with fires and how to deal with snow or how to talk about politics or everything else, really does seem to be crumbling. I mean, look, you know me, I'm a pretty limited government guy. I don't think the government has a lot of things that it should do, and it gets its hands in all sorts of things that it shouldn't get its hands in. But what the government should be able to do, and I say this as someone that lived in New York City most of my adult life, is the government should be able to handle a snowstorm, even if it's a bit of a surprise snowstorm, when it's, you know, 6 or 8 inches. Of course they should be able to deal with that. That being said, Mother Nature is going to do things all the time that we cannot fully prepare for. There are, I mean, there are things that are out of humans' control, and I think part of the problem is that we think that we can control everything, and we think that if only the government is funded a certain way or designed a certain way or acts a certain way, that we can remove all acts of God or control all acts of God, I guess is a better way to say it. And we simply can't. And then, of course, the answer for most of the people on the left and the progressives, or certainly guys like Bill de Blasio, it's like, well, then we just need more money and more money and more money. And it's not what you need. It's not more money that you need. It's more preparation. It's more understanding that some strange things are going to happen every now and again. And there might be a snowstorm that you didn't expect, but your team has to be ready. You're in charge, and you're the guy that's got to make sure that it's ready, and don't sit there and be surprised and woe is me, I got stuck in traffic just like everybody else.
But you create, I think every person does, a hierarchy of responsibilities. Not all of the things you want to do are equal in importance. So before you curb carbon emissions and raise the self-esteem of school kids, shouldn't you make sure the roads aren't crumbling and they're plowed? And it just seems like maybe these guys want a global reach, and they're forgetting their basic duties, which are like very ordinary. Plow the roads, put out the fires.
Yeah, I mean, there's basic things that government needs to do. Put out the fires, plow the roads, make sure that we're safe, make sure that people aren't being mugged in the street and that sort of thing. You know, the California fires is a little bit different than a random snowstorm in New York. The California fires, I mean, this thing was absolutely massive. It was statewide. It's still going on, so it's almost a little uncomfortable to talk about, as I think it's around 600 people that are missing at the moment. But, you know, I've lived in L.A. It'll just coming up on 6 years. And if I tell you that in Los Angeles in 6 years, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say we've had maybe 30 days of rain in about 6 years. You know, you get a little drizzle here and there, but I don't even remember the last time it rained here. Now, if you want to talk about why that is, and does that have anything to do with climate change and whether that's man-made, et cetera, that's a healthy conversation to have. But the idea that we can just manage and control all of this, and that we always know exactly why it happened, and that everyone who's not in charge suddenly knows that they would be in charge and keep more people safe. It's that sort of armchair quarterbacking that I think just kind of makes everybody go, you know what, politics is just pointless. So we need leaders that are a little more nuanced, a little brighter, and a little more willing to go, it's not just about money all the time. It's about how do we really understand these issues.
And maybe there's a limit to human wisdom. Worth remembering. Dave Rubin, thank you.
There absolutely is.
There certainly is. I bump up against it every day in my own life. Great to see you.
I hear you. Good to see you, Tucker.
President Trump has endorsed a congressional effort to overhaul the country's prison system. The First Step Act would reduce criminal penalties, expand early release for convicted felons, and increase funding for anti-recidivism efforts. This bill is being supported by a wide coalition. Jared Kushner, the ACLU, the Fraternal Order of Police. What to think of this? We call one of the people we trust most on this question, Bernie Kerik. He's a former New York police commissioner, also author of the book From Jailer to Jailed, My Journey from Correction and Police Commissioner to Inmate. So he has seen both sides, and he joins us tonight. Bernie Kerik, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks, Tucker.
So address the concerns of people like me who think that there are probably a lot of people who go to prison for longer than they need to go, and it doesn't help any of us when that happens, but are also worried about opening the gates and putting a lot of dangerous people back on the street?
Well, I think there's two things. Bad people who do bad things, they belong in prison. Some need to be there longer than most, or longer than many, and the system deals with that. But what you can't do, Tucker, is you can't put people in prison and expect them to be there. They learn how to steal, cheat, lie, manipulate, con, gamble, and fight, and then don't do anything for them. Don't give them any programs. Don't give them any work ethic, discipline, life skills. Then send them back home and expect, as some members of Congress do, that they're going to be better people. Because at the end of the day, you know, we have congressmen now sitting around Washington in a circle jerk, basically saying, why is the recidivism rate going up? Well, the recidivism rate's going up because you're not doing anything for the people in the system. This incentivizes good behavior. It gives them programs they need to be better citizens when they go out on the street. And it reduces the recidivism because they don't have to revert to crime and go back. You know, and not to mention, you have 2.5 million kids in the country right now without fathers, without parents.
Yeah. Right.
You know, that's another thing. The bill also brings parents and their kids closer together with the 500-mile rule. The bill is the best thing that's happened in criminal justice in probably 2 decades. And you have a couple senators out there that are opposing it. I challenge them to debate me or walk through a federal prison with me and see what's in the system for yourself instead of listening to a staff member. And I'd really urge them, and I'd urge everybody watching, if you've been in the system or know somebody in the system and know what they've been through, call your senators and tell them get this thing done, because Mitch McConnell has the votes. He has the votes. He said 2 weeks ago, if I have the votes after the election, we're going to do this and get it to the president. He has the votes. Now he's saying, well, we may delay it to next year. I'm here to predict if they delay it to next year, it'll never happen. They did this in 2016. They were going to delay it to next year. It never happened. He has the votes now. To not do this now with the votes is an intentional attempt to embarrass the president, or it's some self-serving declaration by Mitch McConnell and the couple people that is opposing it. I think it has to be done. We've never worked this hard to do it. I've been in Washington, D.C., briefing, testifying, and speaking since 2013. You have Newt Gingrich, Van Jones, Lindsey Graham, Cory Booker. Everybody under the sun is trying to get this done. They got to do it now. Mitch McConnell has to do it now.
Well, you're one of the. There's so much noise about this. I wanted to talk to someone I trust on this subject. Bernie Kerik, thanks very much. Great to see you tonight.
Thanks, Tucker.
Well, a Christian woman in Pakistan needs to leave that country immediately, or she's likely to be killed. One country's reaction to her plea says a lot about where the modern West is heading at high speed. That's next. Here's a name you may have heard recently. If you haven't, you should. Asia Bibi. Bibi is a Christian, a mother of 5. She's a farm worker from Pakistan. Her saga began 9 years ago when she went to get a drink of water and quarreled with several Muslim women who objected to drinking from the same cup as a Christian. A mob later descended on Bibi. They insulted her, and then they accused her of insulting the Prophet Muhammad. They assaulted her. Afterward, she was arrested. She was convicted of blasphemy. She was sentenced to death. 2 weeks ago, Bibi got a break. The Pakistani Supreme Court decided there was not enough evidence that she had actually blasphemed anyone, so the court vacated her conviction. But her ordeal is not over. Islamists in Pakistan have staged massive riots demanding that she be executed. One cleric put a bounty on her head. A lawyer who defended Bibi has fled the country, but Bibi herself has been forbidden to leave. Her family has pleaded for asylum in the West. If their pleas are not answered, obviously, Bibi may be killed. Cases like this are why the West created asylum laws in the first place. But the United Kingdom is taking a pass so far. The UK has refused to shelter Bibi despite the fact it has accepted countless other immigrants from that region, or more precisely, because it has accepted those immigrants. According to news accounts, the British government believes that accepting Asia Bibi would cause, quote, security concerns and unrest among certain sections of the community. Ponder that for a second. The United Kingdom gave us the rights that Americans take for granted, the core rights: freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. All of those freedoms are now dying in Britain. In their place remains fear, a fear of offending the very people who have made it impossible to sustain those ancient freedoms. Well, not surprisingly, CNN has found a way to use this tragedy to attack the White House somehow. A piece on CNN's website warns, quote, Trump, take notice. If you court religious extremists, you're in danger of letting mobs weaken democracy. Right. But there's another lesson to be learned here, a lesson that Trump has accepted and CNN has not. The kind of religious extremist willing to behead you for apostasy should not be allowed into your country. When we make room for him or people like him, we very soon run out of room for the values that made us proud to live here in the first place. That story is not yet over, by the way. It's developing, and we plan to follow it and bring you updates as we get them. But first, a weekend, which I hope all of us can enjoy. We'll be back Monday night, 8 p.m., the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. We hope to see you there. By the way, Mike Huckabee, up next, in for Sean. He'll be interviewing the White House press secretary, whom he knows well. It's going to be a great show. Have a great weekend.